came out and grabbed my mommy.
Now you know, dear, there's no such thing as monsters.
Imagine being so dense about the existence of monsters when this literally happens that same afternoon. The fantastical, the uncanny, the hell is even that? Monsters of the Week and Power Rangers have been a staple for 3 decades and have undergone many changes in their design philosophy. They're more than just evil space aliens, they help world build and are the front lines of villainous armies, giving you a taste of what the main threat is. And I'm glad I'm talking about this because it's just in time for spooky season, so we could call this my Halloween video for the year. But to be completely honest, outside of the monster aspect, it doesn't really talk much about scariness, but it's still on theme and I think that counts, right? Now this won't be an in-depth, all-encompassing history of monsters, more of a discussion of some interesting concepts and designs. What, do you really think I do a smash or pass of every monster of the week? That's too silly, I shouldn't do that. Not on YouTube at least. Anyway, you should subscribe and maybe I'll do it elsewhere.
Scary skeletons and shivers down your spine. Shrieking skulls will shock your soul, seal your doom tonight.
Crack open that index of Power Ranger terms. What separates a monster from a main villain? Main villains typically stick around from episode to episode, sometimes being killed off and swapped out, but still have a significant presence. They're also usually at the top of the pecking order, being in charge and essentially boss-level characters for the Rangers to face off at the end of the story arc or a finale. Monsters are monsters of the week. Usually 1, occasionally 2 or more episode characters who typically are dealt with and defeated in a short amount of time. While they sometimes recur, they're typically pawns in the grander schemes of main villains, one-and-dones for the most part. Usually monsters have one gimmick or plan that either foils or ruins a side plot that involves the Rangers or in some way incapacitates them. Most of the time, simply defeating them reverses whatever quote-unquote curse or spell the monster puts on anyone. Monsters of the Week are similar to concepts from other formulaic type shows, such as a new crime to solve for police procedurals, or a new case in a lawyer show, or a new patient of the week in a medical drama. There are a few who tend to break convention and have more plot relevance, for example, team-up antagonists. They're all over the place. Other than returning characters, some are masterminds or generals who were involved in setting up the stakes for the Rangers, and then some are just your typical monsters.
I'm a hex girl, and I'm gonna put a spell on you. I'm gonna put a spell on you.
The designs of the monsters have been fascinating to me. There are ones that push the boundary, making a frightening foe that's sure to give kids nightmares. Others simply go hard on the theme, but there are some that just gave up on trying to look threatening. Designs are typically handled in Japan by companies like Plex or Rainbow Zoke. Both are in charge of costumes and props, but the exact details of what exactly each takes charge of isn't known. Though in my opinion, I believe Plex handles a majority of it, working with both the American and New Zealand productions, creating and designing assets used only on Power Rangers, such as the Titanium Ranger suit and the many battleizers used by many of the Red Rangers. And that's on top of their regular gig as the designers for Super Sentai. The monsters on the show were typically actors wearing rubber suits.
Oh, come on, that is so a guy in a rubber suit.
Actually, rubber's a bit of a misconception. A lot of these suits are made out of foam. These suits are typically entered from an opening in the back, but some require extra pieces like heads or hands to be put on separately. Some are spandex suits with armor pieces, and rarely they'll straight up just be an exposed human. Each season has a unifying theme for all their monsters. I made a whole short about that if you want to check it out. Over the years, the aesthetic of the monster designs have evolved quite drastically. Just how much have they changed?
She is such a bad bitch, though. I will fuck the shit out of that robot, man.
Take an early season monster like Pudgy Pig, and a more modern one, Shockhorn from Power Rangers Dino Fury. Both of these monsters deviate from the standard human proportions, with their heads/faces making up what would normally be the body. Now what's immediately clear is that earlier designs tended to embrace the more fleshy and relatively more lifelike look. and you can see imperfections like folds and wrinkles in the suits, which can be great for more organically inclined villains, but terrible for artificial ones like robots or those wearing sturdy armor. Modern monsters have a more defined look, with every piece of its design accounted for and sculpted to near perfection. The material the suit is made of looks much sturdier and a lot more resistant to the constant wear and tear of stunts. Whereas the older style of suits can be somewhat flexible, allowing for them to be squashed and stretched to an extent, the newer suits tend to have more obvious points of articulation. Design philosophies have taken a considerable turn over the stretch of 3 decades. Older concepts tended to play with some sort of realistic element and alter it, similar to body horror and taking something we all know and turning it into something uncanny and barely recognizable. Things have since changed, with monsters taking a more stylized approach, brighter colors and more cartoony flourishes.
Oh my god!
If that genuinely got you, I've never seen you jump like that before.
How do you do? What's up with you? Little brother, Mr. Hyde.
Diving deeper into the night terror-inducing designs of early seasons, Power Rangers, via Super Sentai, really got away with a surprising amount of over-the-top monsters. Certain monsters just looked downright horrifying. Take Grunchor from Lost Galaxy. While in the American footage looked a bit silly, in Japanese footage it's a whole nother story. The blurry lack of sharpness, the grain, the darker and more muted color grading, looks like they added glycerin or some other film effects liquid to give him a moist sheen and beast-like dribble. His teeth look more menacing, like he could tear into human flesh. A combination of cinematography and a great design really sells him. It's just a shame that the American footage in this episode really takes you out of it. His advanced form is also great, with a suit design creatively engineered to open up with a gigantic mouth capable of eating mountains. That's more the beast type of monster design, one of many that tend to prioritize more creative looks to deviate away from more humanoid villains. A great example of the creativity in this area is Daishi's final form from the finale of Power Rangers Jungle Fury, multiple dragon heads on one body. Unfortunately, by this era, designs tended to be a bit more stiff. While a novel concept, he wasn't particularly scary, as the dragon heads tended to be static, with the exception of 2 on the sides that were clearly sleeves for the stunt actor's arms. Also, I know, not a monster of the day, don't shoot me. As scary as the visuals of multiple heads, giant claws, sharp teeth, and sheer absurdity can get to you, I think a big strength of Power Rangers is when the villains resemble people. We are meant to recognize human faces, so seeing a perversion of God's creation feels off-putting when combined with the inorganic movements of a rubber monster suit.
Do you think God stays in heaven because he too lives in fear of what he's created?
Lightspeed really excelled at this. Many of the main villains had human-like faces with mouths that opened to talk. While the bottom lip and chin could only move up and down, there's something to be said about the mismatched voice, feeling a bit otherworldly and somewhat ethereal.
Do not let Trakina mutate to green, or she will have the power to crush even you, my son.
The flowers will open and spew a gazillion poisonous spores all over Mariner Bay. He's right, Ranger. Go ahead. Come on, Red. Pull the trigger.
Olympius, you'll never get away with this!
Oh, but I have. And you're the ones who will never get away. Don't you pathetic Rangers know when you've lost?
We will have our palace back after we destroy their miserable city brick by brick.
I can feel the power pulsing through my veins. They are mine and mine alone.
Do you really think you can stop me from restoring my palace? My tidal wave will wash your city away.
The nearly minute-long supercut was probably unnecessary, but the uncanny visuals on top of the excellent voice direction from Scott Page Pactor really blends together so well. Monsters of the day from this era tended to have more dialogue thanks to the writing style of these seasons, so monsters like Demonite really took the effect and ran with it. His stiff poker face remains confident as he taunts Red Ranger Carter Grayson into unloading on him point blank and blowing both of them up. Speaking of, you can bid on Demonite's head in the big Power Rangers auction. If you win, you can keep him on your nightstand as he verbally harasses you into shooting him. Anyway, Lost Galaxy had a few weird ones, such as Mean Wheel's Mantis looking like... Why do I feel like that's somewhat offensive in some way? The show would flip-flop between more grotesque designs to goofy ones from season to season. In Turbo's case, both. It was around Time Force that design started to resemble the modern approach. Maybe it was to suit the futuristic theming of the season, but cleaner, more sleek designs complemented the Matrix-like aesthetic that was popular at the time. Not long after, the Disney seasons would expand on this, going for more abstract looks. Ninja Storm's monsters looking very gaudy and over-designed. Dino Thunder was the first to theme their monsters around combinations.
Like anyone's gonna believe a combination bear mushroom ATM monster.
Man, I'm really getting my mileage out of this episode of Dino Thunder. Well, as new as it is to us, in Japan, Sentai has been doing the object and animal combination look since Sun Vulcan in the 80s. SPD had echoes of Time Force's monster designs, while Operation Overdrive tied its look to the different factions of the 4 villain groups: Furious' Ice Army, Moltor's Lava Reptilians, Camdor and Miratrix's objects reanimated with ninja magic, because that makes sense, and the Fear Cats. Well, they had robots. Mystic Force and Samurai were the last seasons to really try and capture this scary aesthetic, and in both of these cases they still looked relatively sanitized compared to earlier designs. This is just a hunch, but monster suits nowadays feel a bit more rugged. They're not built to last, mind you. Beast Morphers had to recreate suits from scratch, as the Go Busters monster suits weren't usable about 6 years out. But if you look at surviving monster suits from back in the day, they've really deteriorated. Ironically, this makes them look more horrifying.
Oh, I'm melting!
Don't forget to brush your teeth, kids. But seasons now, I can't name a monster in the last decade of Power Rangers that had a design worth leaving the lights on at night.
Sleep well while you can, Rangers.
Fucking hell! Hold on, it's fine.
I knew it was gonna do
Oh,
that.
you're fine. Let's just go kill the boss's wife.
Jesus Christ.
Werewolf for mitzvah, spooky, scary. Boys becoming men, men becoming wolves.
Scary design or not, there have been a few monsters of the day that have cemented themselves as horrifying, not necessarily in the visual department, but more in how they're written. I mean, sometimes it's not all that deep, but the implications of certain wacky storylines can bring to mind some rather interesting ideas, to say the least. Like Zeltrax accidentally creating a homunculus child, fully accepting his fatherhood and calling him his son, and then expressing cartoonish grief over it.
Goldenrod, attack the city. Yes, father.
Wait, that sounds familiar. Go, Sonichu! Go out and zap to the extreme.
I will. Thank you, father.
All of Time Force's villains are really just people who were severely mutated. While not a horrific thought in the whimsical Halloween sense, it is a horrifying reflection on how we treat people. Take the infamous episode where Green Ranger Trip helps a mutant criminal who doesn't want to harm people, only being arrested for petty theft so he doesn't go hungry. All the while, Eric the Quantum Ranger chases him down and calls him a freak because he looks different.
You think they deserve the same justice we do? Why? They're not even human. Look at him, he's a freak!
That's obviously a case of profiling, and I think we can all agree that it's scary to be hunted down for your looks, especially when it's something you can't choose. But it sort of makes you think about all the other criminals' lives. What were they like? Though conveniently, at least one mutant on the show was able to have a normal job before turning to a life of crime. And more of a creative choice than writing, but most of the attack bots in RPM don't speak, mainly just making noises. Really hits hard how these are machines designed to kill off humanity. They have no need to communicate with them. Sure, the faces on them start to look silly, but even without the personality of a voice, it makes each bot look like they're watching you, taunting you. You could try to reason with it, but it won't speak back. A bit of a stretch, but it has this weird uncanniness that reminds me of the Godswood trees from Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon.
Don't go beyond the rickety bridge. You'll get lost.
Then the one time an attack bot does speak, it's used to torment Black Ranger Dylan about his past.
Familiar.
You.
Ah, yes. Subject D44.
Something you'd been hearing about in his dreams as of late. I actually featured this in a previous Halloween video. Go watch it for yourself if you haven't. Kids tend to take in media in ways adults tend not to, much like how the spectacle of Power Rangers action scenes felt so much bigger and cooler back then. Seeing something even remotely scary gets seared into our minds for years to come. I mean, it's all a natural defense mechanism. See something scary, perceive it as a threat, commit it to memory so you avoid it. For me, I grew up loving things in the horror genre, and like many, rather than aversion to it, it's a bit of a high that I like to chase. Like spicy foods, some like it, and some can't get enough. My first horror experience was with 2002's The Ring, and it left me with several nightmares for weeks. Seeing something so simple as a cursed videotape, a common everyday object used as a conduit for some otherworldly entity, it just freaked the hell out of me. In my previously mentioned Horrors of Power Rangers video, I touched on how scared I was to watch the VHS copy of Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue, The Queen's Wrath. Well, thanks to The Ring, it was my cursed videotape, so being able to finally overcome it and watch through one of my favorite Power Ranger finales was such a huge achievement for me. Even my love for filmmaking and photography stem from horror. I'm a big fan of the horror game series Fatal Frame, a classic from the PS2 horror golden era. In fact, I had a yearly tradition to play through one of the games on my Twitch channel that I barely stream on nowadays. I wonder if I'm going to get around to doing that this year. You should follow my Twitch anyway. I used to put on Power Rangers in the background as I played these games so I'd be less scared. Funny considering just a few years prior, certain episodes of Power Rangers gave me the absolute heebie-jeebies. In some ways, I'd like to thank Power Rangers for being my unconventional gateway to horror, and part of it is the endless rogues gallery of monsters, both fear-inducing or downright silly. Now that we're at the end of this Halloween video, I should consider doing a Valentine's video in a few months. Top 10 hottest female Power Rangers villains, perhaps?
I ain't gon' let it get to me, I'm just gon' creep down in Pumpkin Hill, I got to find my lost piece. I know that it's here, I can sense it in my feet. The great emerald's power allows me to feel. I can't see a thing, but it's around somewhere. I'm gonna hold my head, cause I have no fear. This probably seems crazy, a graveyard